We are back, and it's been a while. So this episode is about a deck while I was playtesting my Geist mid-range deck. And after seeing this deck from that match, I was captivated by this deck. It caught my eye. Back in Legacy, I was interested by building this kind of deck and hopefully bring it to Modern. And I think they did. It has a lot of potential, so I did it. I sold a few cards and started working on building my own version of it. I'm sure this is an already existing deck, Reanimator. So this deck, based from the cards that I saw, it's built around this card, Archon of Cruelty. 8 mana to cast, 6/6 flying. But what you really wanted from this card is its enter the battlefield effect. Cruelty enters the battlefield or attacks. Target opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Discard a card, loses 3 life. I draw a card and gain 3 life. When it comes into play, it does all those things. This is a 1-card combo to turn things around. Pretty much that's what it is. So to achieve that, similar to the Entomb Exhume combo, and Entomb Exhume is similar to Unmarked Grave and Persist. The one good thing I noticed about this card is how versatile this card can be. In situation wherein you really need to get something to your graveyard to help you with your deck, you can do that. Like for example, if you already have Archon of Cruelty, then you can use Unmarked Grave, target Unburial Rites, and put Unburial Rites to your graveyard, and flashback Unburial Rites to get Archon into play. Something like that. It's not just simply to get Archon and putting it into your graveyard and then using Persist to get Archon into play. It's not that simple. This card is very powerful if used properly and at the right moment. Then Persist. Because Persist is like Unmarked Grave, but it's limited to all non-legendary creatures. Any legendary dragon, put it into your graveyard and get it. No, you're not going to be able to do that. However, again, it revolves around Archon of Cruelty. Now, once you know that this is how the deck works, build around it, right? What are the normal suspects that you would normally put in this card? I don't know, a playset of Counterspell, and then Snapcaster Mage, because why not? You're doing crazy stuff, right? And then Cryptic Command, because you can put Cryptic. Also, Jace is my insurance win condition. Like if you'd notice, I don't have a lot of Planeswalker in this deck. Jace is an insurance planeswalker, meaning if all else fails, I don't have another win condition in this deck. I could probably go with Celestial Colonnade, but what if it also got destroyed? So just in case, we have an insurance win condition. Now let's talk about other cards. Gifts Ungiven. I noticed my opponent has this. At first I didn't realize, but the good thing about having Gifts Ungiven is you do have a choice of what cards you wanted to show your opponent. Like for example, I can pick Archon of Cruelty, Unburial Rites, Faithful Mending, and Unmarked Grave or Persist, right? So what does this mean? Like 4 cards, and your opponent will decide which one goes to your graveyard. However you look at it, it's a losing situation because if they decided to put Unburial Rites in the graveyard, you still have flashback. Use Faithful Mending to draw 2 cards and then discard Archon of Cruelty and put it back into play. So, you see what I mean? These 4 cards, it's over. That's just how I see it. And how would you do it? So that's how good Gifts Ungiven is in this deck. Now, speaking of Faithful Mending, Faithful Mending is a new card. I think this is from the Midnight Hunt. And it's really amazing because it's an instant for 2 mana that lets you draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards and gain 2 life. And you can flash it back. It allows you to do what you wanted to do in this deck, but at the same time, dig for more cards, gain 2 life for just 2 mana with flashback. It's really amazing. Because here's the thing about this deck. While you're trying to build your deck, you need to protect yourself from dying. You're gonna die very quickly with this deck. You need to use your spot removals carefully. How many spot removals do I have in this deck? 5? Path to Exile, Damn, which I can turn into a Wrath of God if I want to, and then 3 Prismatic Ending. Now, it's not a lot, so you really have to be very careful especially for an aggressive deck. But once you survive, you'll be able to turn things around. Now, what I did differently is that this deck is weak against Graveyard Hate. Let's be honest, it is weak against Graveyard Hate. That's how I beat this deck, because I have Graveyard Hate in my sideboard, and I managed to draw them, and my opponent wasn't able to do anything about it. They lost because they are not able to go with their plan. So that is why I am putting Ashiok Dream Render main board. It does what I wanted to do with my deck, because my first skill here, target yourself and put cards in your graveyard. It will still exile your opponent's graveyard even if you target yourself. It's not exiling your graveyard, just your opponent, and you're still putting cards into your graveyard. So you can also do that. The other thing that I like about this card, that's why I've decided to put it as a main board instead of a sideboard, is your opponents can't search their libraries. If I'm facing a mirror, this is a really good card for a mirror match. Why? Because Unmarked Grave lets you search. Gifts Ungiven lets you search, which Ashiok also stops you from doing. So pretty much you're stopping the deck entirely. That's how powerful Ashiok is main board in this deck. So yeah, I decided to just include it. Now, I think I've talked about the entire deck so far. Aside from the lands, not a lot to talk about. I have Castle Ardenvale, probably if it's down to 3. If it's down to 3 or down to 2, it will give you those 2 points of damage that you need to finish off your opponent. Field of Ruin is because it's Field of Ruin. I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe you'll face a Tron, maybe. So I just decided to keep it as is. And then I do have Geier reach Sanitarium. I'm not yet completely sold into having this in this deck, although it's Faithful Mending in a stick, basically. And then the usual suspects, I have the fetches, the basics, the shock lands. That's pretty much it for the lands. Now this card is the one card that I could say I could interchange. I could, I don't know, Massacre Wurm. The reason behind that is I have never really tested this deck against a super aggro deck with 1/1 creatures with haste and then attack you in the face. I may eventually change it to a Massacre Wurm just for those kind of situation wherein if they're as small as just 1/1 or 2/2 creatures, then yeah, I'll probably use Massacre Wurm over that. Now let's talk about the sideboard. Since I already know how to beat this deck, my sideboard is revolving around how to beat the deck that would beat this deck. So first, we need to put Disenchant to destroy enchantment that exile all graveyard. And then Timely Reinforcement to hopefully survive long enough to win the game. I also have Eliminate to destroy 3 mana planeswalkers. And then Dolphin's Veto, Catch All, pretty much anything, but this is mainly for control matchups. Damping Sphere is for Tron matchups that I hope not to get to see a lot. Cling to Dust is also for a mirror match. This is an instant way for me to deal with it before they can. And then Blood Chiefs is similar to Eliminate, but just in case they have planeswalkers that is big enough that Eliminate cannot target. So this is just for that. Void Mirror is also for Tron matchups. Supreme Verdict, Settle the Wreckage, 2 mass removal spells that I have to partner with Dam, which is already in the main deck. And then Kambal for aggressive decks, burn decks, just to gain life and be able to survive long enough. Vindicate, I'm not really sure if I wanted it, but because of its versatility to destroy any permanent, that is why I have it. And that's the deck. How did it go? Let me show you a few matches when I played this deck with. Alright, now this is a mirror match. And I kept a not so enticing opening hand, to be honest. And then I got the rest. So I'm left with Snapcaster Mage and a bunch of lands, which is fine. What I know about this deck, based on a few games and matches that I've done so far, is this deck is not in a rush. Okay, at this point I already know it's a mirror match because they cast Unmarked Grave and put Archon of Cruelty in their graveyard. So that's fine. At least as early as turn 3, turn 2, I already know what my opponent is, and then I'll be able to come up with a plan on how to beat it. As of the moment, based on what the cards that I have in my hand, the plan is when they cast Persist, we counter it no matter what. That's the only purpose of Counterspell right now. which is to counter Persist. At least up until until I get something in the next draw step. But right now, that's the only thing I'm worrying about, because as soon as Archon of Cruelty comes into play, it's going to be a huge problem, and I don't have a lot to deal with it. I do have Path in my graveyard, and I do have Snapcaster, but now that I drew Ashiok Dream Render, the game plan changes. Counterspell is not solely for that purpose anymore. For example, Faithful Mending. But I'll allow it because I know I have Ashiok, so I'll be able to... There you go. There's the first Persist. Counter it because Ashiok Dream Render is not yet ready. I can't deal with it yet. So I have to counter it. And they have a choice of casting Faithful Mending again and drawing and discarding, which I will allow anyway. Besides, I don't have enough to counter it at that point. But now that I drew a second Ashiok, and yes, it's a main deck Ashiok, I now have the audacity of casting both of them at the same time, at the same turn. And yeah, there you go. That's what happened. No graveyard for my opponent. And now my opponent is trying to figure out a way to get out of this mess. And me, I have Snapcaster, I have Prismatic Strand. So in case they find something that as long as Prismatic Strand can reach those casting costs, then we don't have much of a problem. Faithful Mending and gaining 2 life at this point is not much of an issue for me because, as you can see, I'm messing their graveyard. So I now have enough time to pull off my own combo, my own game plan. But of course, my opponent decided to quit, which makes sense at this point. Okay, moving on to game 2. Good opening hand, to be honest, but my opponent said that probably can't beat a main deck graveyard hate. So they quit, or they gave up, which I mean, I can understand, especially with this kind of opening hand that I just got. I have 2 Ashoks already in my opening hand, but that's a good start. And it's a good way to justify my reasons and my reasoning to put Ashiok main deck.